Could I get confirmation, please, that you can see my screen when I'm sharing?
No, I cannot yet. Now
we can. Yes, we can see it now.
Now we can see it.
Good enough, thank you. And I don't have a Zoom screen, so if you could, because I've got my speaking notes and so on, if you could just let me know how many people we've got in attendance. And
currently have 41 people in attendance, and they're still coming in.
Perfect, thank you. So we'll just wait for the attendance count, I guess, to stop rolling, and then we'll get going. Oh, I can actually see it up there.
Dave, you have a question from Donna McMahon asking, will this be recorded? The answer is yes, this will be recorded live on YouTube.
Yeah, got it. I'll be mentioning that. Thank you.
I think she may have heard me.
It looks to me like the participant count is kind of slowed down to about 46 here.
Yes, I think you can go ahead.
So we will start the meeting. Oh, looks like I had some more of my settings back. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out on a sunny afternoon. I know some of my household is down at the beach, taking in the last of the rays of, I guess, the first day of summer. So for starters, just to give us, or give myself an idea as to how to space the time out on these 4 subjects, Rebecca is going to put out a poll that you can click on while I'm doing the introduction, and we'll just be asking you for 1, 2, 3, or 4. And in fact, I believe you can choose multiple, but it'll help us, as I say, spend the most time on the subjects that are most interesting to people. So you can see the 1 to 4 there is United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Active Transportation Network Grant, Gallpoint Traffic Calming, and the Dog Park. Now, there will be opportunities, so I'll get, Rebecca's going to be working on that poll while I'm talking. And I think you'll be able to see the screen at the same time as the poll is going on. Yep, and I can see the poll going too.
Poll is going.
Kind of neat. Okay, so comments and questions. So there's going to be opportunities during this meeting after each of the 4 items. We're going to keep to a fairly strict schedule, just so that we don't end up here until 10 o'clock at night without addressing the last couple items on the agenda or something silly like that. So that one, you will be putting up your hand, your virtual hand at the bottom of your screen. It says chat, and then there's also you can email in any questions that you might have. All right, so are you going to end polling?
I will end the polling.
Perfect.
Let's share the results.
Okay, So it looks like most people here are interested in the Gallpoint Road traffic calming. Next is the off-leash dog park. Third is the grant works. And 4 is UNDRIP, which is the acronym for United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So good, that was actually more or less what I had figured, or what we had figured, so shouldn't be too much adjustment on the time. Let's see if we can advance the slide here. Or not. Hang on a minute, we'll go that instead. It's thinking, but it's not cooperating. Now it's cooperating. Okay, so for starters, this is a staff public meeting. This isn't a council meeting. Council there may be members of council here, but they're here to listen in. They're not, they're kind of leaving it to staff and the public. And staff will be reporting back to council in a more formal manner as well. In July, all going well. We also had a meeting on June 7th for Glassford, and we did a subsequent poll of the Glassford area, and that will be reported at the same meeting. This meeting is being recorded on YouTube, so just be aware of that. If you're asking questions via Zoom, then your voice will be recorded. And if you're not keen on that, then please feel free to email infrastructure@gibsons.ca. We will be using those, we will be putting all those comments together. I think I mentioned the raise hand feature, but a couple reminders. Please be respectful to all our other attendees and staff in voicing your questions or comments. And please state the road you live on. That will be helpful for us, again, to correlate the information we get. And there is the chat function at the bottom to type a note to the moderator, who will then, if there is time, relay that question to me for answering. And then regardless of whether your question is read or not, they will be copied to be addressed at a later time. And again, in that, please state the road you live on. So first agenda item is comment on the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And this is for information and questions. And just as another piece of information for those of you who are not aware, today is actually June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada. And in the Indigenous people in Canada, that includes the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis. And there's a website address to our site that will give you various links to other information, as well as to what council is doing as this rolls out. So on April 20th, council resolved to adopt and implement UNDRIP, which is the acronym for the title there. UNDRIP was the United Nations and applies to many, many nations. I think there's 149 nations, I believe. And out of that came the Truth and Reconciliation, the TRC Commission of Canada, and there were 94 calls to action that came out of that commission. And UNDRIP is to be used as a framework for Indigenous reconciliation. And I'm pretty sure that folks here who are listening in would have seen the recent news about those children in Kamloops, the bodies that had been discovered on the site of a residential school in Kamloops, or previously a residential school. And although that may have been a shock to some people and news to some people, It's not news to many. It is just that the evidence was now there to back up statements that have been made for many years by largely probably by First Nations, I suspect, but by others as well. And I've only recently become or started to educate myself on this, on UNDRIP and the what First Nations in our own community as well as throughout Canada have had to endure over the past 150 plus years, I believe it is, from the folks who first sailed in and took over their land. We in Gibsons live on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, and staff are working towards building individual relationships with our counterparts in Squamish. And council is also working on building relationship as well. And that is a key part of the reconciliation and the healing that needs to take place between the First Nations in Canada and well, the rest of us really. And if you know just a little bit, that's great. I would encourage you to learn more because, you know, over the past 3, 4, 5 years, my eyes have certainly been opened, and I've only just begun to scratch the surface on my own self-education. So bottom line is the council has committed to use the framework for reconciliation and to take active part in reconciliation, not just providing lip service to it or a bottom line on an email signature, but to take active steps towards healing. And this will be done in many different ways. It will not be happening overnight, but it takes all of us to set things right, I suppose, for want of a better word. And I think the first thing to do is educate yourself as to what has occurred, and then be looking for opportunities individually to build relationship with anybody from First Nations community. But that's what council has directed us to do. And they will be providing staff training, sensitivity training, etc. In the coming months. So at this point, I think that's probably, I could go on quite a bit on that, but perhaps we could just take, if there happens to be any questions on what this means for council and the staff, then please feel free. Otherwise, I will move on to the next item on the agenda. So Rebecca, if you could just let me know if there's any questions.
If anyone has any questions, could you please raise your hand? Yes, we have questions.
Okay, I'm not an expert on this, but I will do my best to answer. So go ahead, Rebecca.
We have a question from Trisha Joel. Go ahead, Trisha.
Hi, my statement is actually not a question. I just want to appreciate that Dave spoke there to the adoption of this UNDRIP in April that the council's taken on, and that it's not meant to just be a superficial gesture, and that the staff are receiving training, and that he personally has taken on to do some unlearning of his own internal racism. And I wanted to note that in the Coast Reporter, they put an effort there to put a lot of the recommendations into the paper that we just received on Friday. And I thought that was a very great step forward for us to be doing that some more. And not keeping it in a very small section of the population only. So thank you very much for doing that, Dave. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia, and I appreciate the comments. And I think if we are all doing our part and improving our awareness and building a relationship, I think that we will hit a certain point where it becomes the norm as opposed to the exception, and we'll start seeing some significant change, or that's what my hope is.
If there's anyone else with a question, please raise your hand. And please kindly state your name and where you live. I see no hands raised, Dave.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll move on to the next item, but please do perhaps bookmark that link there, and you can search for it on the town's website. It doesn't just refer to town initiatives. It does provide you links to the UNDRIP documentation, as well as the TRC calls to action, and then on top of that, anything specific that council and staff are working on. One other one I forgot to mention is that we have reached out to the Squamish in regards to street naming. And we want to recognize them in a way that would be meaningful to them. We've opened up those conversations, but and changed the street naming policy. But at this point, there's more work to do on the policy based on feedback that we received from Squamish, and that policy is on that website as well. So far, I believe I am more or less on schedule. So the next item to speak on is the Active Transportation Network Grant. And this is being given to you for information, for comment, and for questions. So earlier this year, the town received a grant in the amount of $675,000. Often there is a portion that is funded by grant, and then the municipality has to provide a certain amount of funds, often ranging from 50% to down to 20%. But on occasion, there are these 100% grants, which are wonderful because there's no impact on taxation. So it is a tourist-dependent community fund that it was this grant was issued through, and it was to support COVID-19 recovery for tourist-dependent communities. So $675,000 for the town to put towards active transportation is excellent. And the focus of this grant is to complete links between existing facilities, and I'll be showing you some maps as to what's existing and where we can tie these links together. And it's going to be comprised of multi-use paths, both paved and unpaved, road signage, warning drivers or giving direction, pavement markings, crosswalks, bike parking and e-bike charging stations, and working on our directional and place naming signage as well. And that's something else that, especially for the place naming, is hopefully we'll have input from the Squamish on that as well. So the first thing to do is to, at least in engineering, is to come up with an acronym. And so ATN is the Active Transportation Network. The numbers that we've got up here, 1A, 1B, 1F, were just in relation to the grant application. I see I've got to try and get out of that straight sun. So the number and lettering is just to do with the grant. It's got no other significance than that. But using those and using the map from the grant, 1A down near the bottom of the screen here and a very temperamental mouse, is Glassford Road. And as mentioned, we had a June 7th meeting with the area residents, and we also completed a survey, and we'll be taking the results of that back to council. And so the speed limit is to be lowered along that corridor. However, Glassford Road is fairly broad or fairly wide, and unimpeded vision, so it does encourage speeding. And so one of the proposals to address that is blocking Glassford Road at the south end to vehicular traffic, which would assist in making that a little bit more pedestrian and cycle friendly. And I'll be speaking a little bit more on that a little bit later in the report, or sorry, in the presentation here. 1B is Gower Point and Dougal improvements. So my mouse is being next to useless here. So along Gower Point Road in front of Dougal Road or Dougal Park, there's going to be improvements from Garrow Point to Alder Springs near the corner of Prowse. There is at-grade bike lane. And then when you get past Alder Springs, and any of you who are familiar with Dougal Park knows that we've got a fair amount of angle parking there, which makes it challenging to provide a safe corridor for everybody, cyclists and pedestrians. And so at this point, we're looking at a multi-use, widening the existing sidewalk and changing it to multi-use. We recognize that there are young children that will be crossing in this area, and so cyclist speed will be something that will need to be addressed, and we'll have signage up and pavement markings and so on. All of these individual locations that we're looking at, town staff are sitting down with TRAC, which is the local meeting, Sunshine Coast. Transportation Choices is where TRAC comes from, Transportation Choices, and they're so they have a lot of ideas themselves. So we're using them as a resource to determine what the final design is for these particular locations. There's also going to be a crosswalk at the north end of Glassford where it intersects near Dougal Park, and that's meant to shorten the crossing distance between one side of the road and the other. I should have mentioned at the beginning that the grant works are the green lines and the red lines are the existing or proposed. So we're going to be talking about the Gower Point Road improvements or traffic calming. That's at the bottom of the map, and that's shown to be, as a existing or proposed, and of course that is proposed. From moving up towards 1F, which is Marine Drive and Gower Point improvements, there's going to be pavement markings, signage, bike racks, and charging stations. Now, that's not necessarily the only place that we'll be putting bike racks and charging stations. And again, we'll be discussing this with TRAC, as well as, and I can't remember what the official name is, but it's Safe Routes to School. And there's been a fair amount of work in that done in that as well. And so we'll be looking at that for recommendations or identified issues. And I think that's probably all I need to say on Lower Gibsons. Upper Gibsons, you can see 1D there on Venture Way. We are going to be having on-street street markings on as it approaches or is near the intersection of Gibsons Way. And that will connect to a fairly new multi-use path that is being constructed as a condition of development. And that same routing actually goes over to Parkland. So it's missing a red line there, and then also goes over to the rec center. We'll be doing a bit of improvement as well on Mahan that will be marking out the bike lanes on that section. And then that leads down into White Tower Park and the trails that we have down there. There's a section between the recent improvements on the corner. I just want to point at the screen here. On the corner here, and ones that were done 4 or 5 years ago. And it's the same detail, a multi-use asphalt path that will be going, joining those two sections together. Then we've got a location that has been requested a number of times for a crosswalk. And I'm very cautious about putting in mid-block crosswalks because they can give pedestrians a false sense of security, and drivers aren't always on the ball and watching for pedestrians mid-block as opposed to at controlled intersections. So we'll be adding on some sort of pedestrian activated lighting on that as well. And then linking the Venture Way improvements over to the multi-use path that exists on Payne Road. And any of you who walk that between Venture Way and the Payne Road development, that a section of that is actually trespassing on private property. And so we're redirecting the path onto public property. 1C there right in the middle is linking the trail that was recently constructed at the end of Woodsworth extension. There's a small development, well, medium size, I suppose, for Gibsons, just north of Brothers Park. And that will be linking over to Sunnycrest Mall. So you can see we're starting to develop this cohesive linking bicycle and pedestrian network. And this is just going to provide us with a framework. There's going to be lots more work to come. And the OCP, the Official Community Plan, indicates where those corridors are planned. And so this is definitely providing us with a kind of a really decent skeleton on active transportation. Lastly, Reed Road, called 1E there, there's a portion of it that is going to be constructed by development. And then the grant will allow us to put some money towards the improvements there, as well as council having committed some money to section 1E as well. Now the part on 2A that is blue, that was another part of our application, kind of a part 2. They asked us to divide it up, and we were unsuccessful on securing the funding for a multi-use path along Reed Road. However, we've got a section in place, and we're going to be looking for opportunities to continue that. So there are 2021 works underway that are not grant funded that you may have noticed. We got a downhill bike lane going in along Gibsons Way. We're just waiting for the pavement markings on that one. And that goes from School Road, North Road intersection down to North Fletcher. We've got improvements going on North Fletcher itself, and we'll be seeing pavement going in there in the next week or two. And there was improvements done to School and South Fletcher intersection, which will in a way make a little bit more sense once the works to North Fletcher is done. And then, as mentioned, there's the improvements that are required of a developer on Reed Road between Payne and Park. I mentioned to you that we are collaborating with Track on these projects, and we are required to commence work according to the grant in 2020, and some of the possible projects that we might start depending on timing with other works are Glassford and or Venture and or Reed and or the bike racks. The bulk of the works are going to be completed in 2021. And Glassford works are possibly in conjunction with a lot creation. From the last meeting, we had some questions as to how the road closure, proposed road closure, would affect the traffic calming or vice versa. And there's no difference to the lot size or location that is being authorized by council at the end of Glassford, and that's that orange shape, kind of at the corner of Gallpoint and Glassford there. And what council has not provided direction on staff yet is to whether an affordable housing development will actually be constructed there, or whether that lot will be sold and those funds put towards affordable housing. The actual resolution from council was back in 2017 that we look at a number of different road ends to create lots for affordable housing. And one way or the other, emergency access will be provided. But if the road is actually closed as currently suggested, then that emergency access will still be able to be, or it was still able to be accessed. So I'll back up one. So that brings us to the end of that one. We're at 7:30, so I've got about 15 minutes for questions. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind facilitating that.
Yes,
please.
The first question you have is, I'm not sure if it's what the person's name is. If you could please introduce yourself. I believe it's A. Sherry LePage.
Hi, Dave. It's Sherry.
Hi. Oh, hi, Sherry.
Hi. Yeah, I just have a, pardon me, I have a question regarding the decision process of making the choices of the trails, because I mean, on one hand, I'm really excited to see some good travel systems going from Lower Gibsons to Upper Gibsons, but I'm concerned about, like, for example, the 2A section of Reed Road, where a lot of tourists would actually probably prefer that route for getting on to their camping destinations, etc. So I'm just curious about if the town could share the process with maybe TRAC's involvement as to how these choices are prioritized as one question.
Yeah. I'll answer that one quickly. So what we did, this was, I think, the third or fourth time that we had applied for kind of this scope of grant. And what staff always look at is what are the criteria for the grant and where we can, I suppose, make the most attractive application that would have the most success. And we also endeavor to make sure that the project that we are applying for a grant is already on the general list of council priorities. And so we came up with this completion of missing links. And as I say, we did apply as well for the Reed Road section. But I guess they were trying to, often they are oversubscribed. Most times grants are oversubscribed. And so while we do recognize that Reed Road is an important link, we were unsuccessful on that portion. So we can't kind of take this grant money and put towards Reed Road apart from the area that has been identified. However, it's uppermost in staff's minds. We are looking for opportunities, and the regional district is also going to be going down the town side of the road with a couple water mains. And again, we're looking for opportunities to be able to connect that link. And that is on TRAC's priorities as well. They see that as an important link. So we definitely hear you on that.
The next question, Dave, we're going to answer live. It was entered through the Q&A. It's from Deb Mowbray. She says, I just think blocking and stopping the flow of traffic is ridiculous there. I believe it's needed to have those two options to travel. I'm fine with speed bumps or what have you, but actually closing the road, I'm just blown away this would be considered. It will then force way more traffic in front of the park. Now that four-way stop at Dougal and Gower is going to be overloaded, I feel. Just a poor decision and really sad to see if it goes through. It sounds like it is. There are other things you can do other than shutting down a road that has always been a road, in my opinion. I don't know if you wish to speak to that.
Yeah, I can. For starters, it's not decided that the road is going to be closed. And if council ultimately decides that, yes, this is something that they potentially want to approve, the question to the area residents was, are you open to a trial closure? And so that would be some temporary measures put in place, and we would be doing traffic counts and determining what happens in other areas. Now, I believe I've got a slide later on. Yes, I do. And I will speak to the issue of where traffic goes and pushing traffic onto Gallpoint Road during my next segment of the presentation, if you don't mind.
And the next question is from an anonymous attendee. The question is, has there been any tracking of traffic volume done in proposing closing Glassford?
Yeah, we do have traffic counts on Glassford and that whole area. We will be looking to obtain more counts as well to assess the relative success, I suppose, of if the trial measure, well, actually, if any measures go forward on Glassford Road. So yes, we do have some before traffic counts.
Okay. And now you have another person with their hand up, Nancy Hughes. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, hi, Dave. My name is Nancy Hughes. I live on Alder Springs, and I'm looking for clarification. When you say that you're planning on widening the sidewalk that borders Dougal Park, what's happening to the angle parking there?
We are not planning on removing the angle parking. If there's, and I don't believe that there is room to widen the sidewalk towards the parking, it would be more shifting over the fence by maybe as much as a meter, 3 feet, to accommodate that. But no, the parking is largely to remain untouched.
Okay, thank you, because we already have a problem on Alder Springs with long-term parking. So our concern is that, parking of cars will be pushed more into the neighborhood.
Sure. And we do see a lot of events at Dougal Park where that parking is fairly full. So we see that parking, retaining that parking as being important. Thanks for your question, Nancy. Appreciate it.
And now there's Catherine McKnight. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I noticed on the survey that the only thing that you asked about was being open to the closure.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know we discussed at that meeting the making it a one-way street, having Garrowpoint perhaps going east or north. I'm not sure which way, towards Langdale, and say Glassford going away from Gibsons. But I noticed that was not given as an option on the survey. Because to me that might be a better option or an easier option.
Thanks, Catherine. There's a couple things on that. Partly it'll be answered by the classification of the roads. But one other thing that can often happen with one-way streets is that traffic speed can actually increase because there's not the added obstacle or distraction or whatever you want to call it of oncoming traffic. And as I say, my next slide will also speak to classification of roads as well. So that was why it wasn't specifically included. The idea did intrigue me, and council may still wish to see staff pursue that. Regardless, though, I believe the survey did allow for other options or questions or comments as to what else you could potentially like to see on Glassford.
Next, you have a question from Leanne Johnson. She's written her question in. She writes, closing Glassford could redirect most traffic from Gower into town from Area E to continue to Dougal Park, where you are also proposing greater use by bike and peds with a much needed crosswalk for neighbor kids. This is consolidating traffic instead of dispersing it. Doesn't make much sense in my opinion. South Fletcher Road, Leanne Johnson.
Okay, and again, that'll be addressed in the next slide as well.
And next you have a question written from Nick Smith. The purpose here is to slow traffic. Creating one-way streets works well in Vancouver, where the purpose is to speed up traffic, which is congested. I guess that's more of a comment than a question.
Yep.
And Leanne Johnson is now also online. Go ahead, Leanne.
Oh, sorry. I also was concerned about the lack of pedestrian safety along Gower Point Road. So when you close Glassford, there are very large numbers of people who already walk along Gower Point, and they are not going into town. They are coming from the library toward the Bay Area neighborhoods. So the natural pedestrian route is along South Fletcher. It is not to go all the way down to Glassford and then back up again. So I'm just concerned about the safety for pedestrians and cyclists along Gower Point Road. There's some really dangerous spots.
We have cross sections, or desired cross sections for all our roads within Gibsons. Most often those cross sections are used for new roads because we're more or less starting from scratch. They do consider all modes of transportation. And when we get into the next topic, which is the Garrow Point traffic calming, you'll see that the cross section is not able to be applied. However, we've come up with something that fits that area and does deal with all modes of transportation. And that opportunity has arisen on a really bad section of Garrow Point Road. And that opportunity has arisen through development. So the developer is paying for the improvements along that section of road. Now the remainder, or at least the section of Garrow Point Road from the one end of Glassford over to South Fletcher intersection, that is, I've had a look at that, and an initial look there with the funding that we have, we may be able to widen the shoulder to make a safe area for pedestrians, although it's not the ultimate and not what we want to see in the long run. It will still provide pedestrians a place to walk on Gower Point Road. And again, this is kind of using the grant money and the funds and so on as permitted, I suppose, in the grant project. And as I say, I've looked on I guess it's the east side of the road, and there, apart from a couple minor areas, there appears to be enough room for improving that for pedestrians. So that will be one of my recommendations to council, depending on what comes out of the Glassford survey and so on. Thank you. We are at time, but if we've got a couple more questions, maybe I could take those.
We've got about 4 more right now. Kathleen Vance. Kathleen, you can go ahead.
I am on Headlands Road, and I was intrigued because last couple meetings ago, 2 weeks ago, someone said that if Glassford were blocked, they would then take Blaine Lane. And
Mhm.
so I went to walk down Blaine Lane, and I am confused about why Blaine Lane even goes to Gower Point for vehicles.
Yep.
Because it makes sense that it connects to Beachcomber because people need access from there, but nobody really needs vehicle access except emergency to Gower Point from Blaine
Mhm.
Lane. So
Yep.
I would be a happier pedestrian if I could have, if I didn't have to worry about cars doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and something that again we would probably look at the counts on the traffic and see what the side effects are of potentially blocking Glassford. But I agree that that is worth considering to make it possibly more pedestrian friendly. And so if we were to eliminate one link or the other, either onto Gower Point Road or onto Glassford, that pedestrians would still be able to use it and emergency vehicles. Now, I'm not saying that, for any Blaine Lane residents or Beachcomber residents, I'm not saying we're going to close Blaine as well and this road as well, but we are looking at what the results are, and if there are problems with the trial run of closing Glassford, if that's what council decides to do, then we want to be able to have ideas in our back pocket that we could have to address any negative repercussions of the closure. So thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Next, you have Alan Williams. Go ahead, Alan. Alan, are you there? Okay,
He's muted.
he's muted.
Sorry, I
There you
didn't
go.
request to speak. My apologies.
Oh,
Okay. His hand was up by mistake, I think. So we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Are you considering also adding traffic calming to this section of Gower Point Road, i.e. extending the measures on the adjacent section of Fletcher Road, at least for the section where people and kids walk to the beach?
I'm not altogether clear where they are referring to. If it is towards Secret Beach, that is the Ministry of Highways, Transportation and Highways. No, hold on, Transportation and Infrastructure. I'm not positive that that's what they're referring to, but the traffic calming will be going from the, will begin around Franklin Road, heading south and as far as the town boundary at this point. And that is because that's largely because that's developer driven. But it's also an area that is specifically or particularly bad for pedestrians and so on. I'll take one more question on this one, Rebecca, and then we will move on in order to keep roughly on track. Anybody who has written down a question to be answered, we will be capturing that and we'll be addressing that. And depending on how we go through the next two sections, we may have time for some additional Q&As at the end of the agenda. So Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind, just I'll let you pick one more and then we'll move on.
All right, you have Rita Kutsodimos. Rita on Burns Road. Just a comment to say I'm very pleased to see the big investment into an active transportation network plan, and as someone who lives in the Bay Area, I'm happy to see traffic calming along Glassford and would support the closure, particularly if it is informed by a trial period to collect traffic data.
Excellent, thank you. And I know one concern did come up about whether traffic would then go down Franklin. I would suspect no, because it's not very direct and they're heading off in a direction that they wouldn't be going. They'd be heading east instead of north. So for starters, I don't think that that would be a problem. Second of all, if that was an outcome, then my proposal would be to put a couple additional speed cushions like we have down there at the other end of Franklin, down near Headlands, in order to discourage that sort of behavior. So thanks folks for your questions. Lots of interest, and as I say, we'll just keep moving on in order to stay on track. And if we've got any time at the end of the meeting, we will take some additional questions, but regardless, please put them in the chat so that we can capture them for addressing in our subsequent report to council. Thank you. So this one garnered a fair amount of interest, the Gallpoint traffic calming and the proposed dog park. And so those are the last two items on our agenda. And so this is for information, comment, and questions on the traffic calming only. I mean, you're welcome to ask questions that are related to the traffic in that one area. But as we all know, Gospel Rock and Block 7 development has been a source of a lot of comment already. And I don't want to end up going down bunny holes on any other aspects of it. I wanted to stay focused on the traffic calming. So when this property rezoned, one of the things that happens is a development agreement is registered on the property, and that is negotiated between council based on what they hear at the public hearings, or based in part on what they hear at public hearings, and the developer. And so that development agreement is a binding document, and once council's registered it, at least in this particular case, all the instructions or council's instructed staff on how to and when to require certain items. At this point, they're not council decisions per se. And any change to that development agreement requires agreement of the developer. So there's no negotiation that is required at this point. So the developer has his marching orders based on council's input and the drafting of the development agreement. So the Gallpoint traffic calming is required of the developer, and some of the conditions were that it's facilitate a maximum speed of 30 kilometers, and that the comfort and safety for cyclists on the west side is to be considered in the design of the road changes. And there's also a requirement to build a 3-meter multi-use path on the water side, which is I'm calling the east side, travels both north-south and east-west. So this is a part where we are getting some questions about Glassford Road and splitting traffic, etc. And the town in the OCP has road classifications, and these road classifications are typical, municipally all over the country, as well as provincially. And the basic ones are arterial, collector, and local. And I think the ministry might have arterial, urban, and rural, and what have you, but basically we're talking about arterial, collector, and local. And our local roads are roads that access usually residential properties, and those local roads feed into a collector road, which by definition collects traffic from these local roads. And then that collector road then channels that traffic to an arterial. And in our case, this arterial would be Gibsons Way, of course, and North Road. There's also an arterial road. Reed Road is classified as an arterial, and Payne Road is also classified as an arterial. So these roads are defined in the OCP, and it's all part of what is our community going to look like. And that is the guiding document for council and for staff. And in that, Glassford is intended to be a local road because that's intended to be residential, focused. It's meant to be a local standard. Whereas Gallpoint is meant to be the collector road. Now, if my cursor is not going to behave itself. So Gower Point is actually the collector road, and it goes through the orange area, which is the area we're talking about for traffic calming, goes over towards South Fletcher, meets at that intersection, then turns down beside Dougal Park, and then you turn towards town, staying on Gower Point Road, through the village, and then down Marine Drive. And there's also another collector road that is the lower part of Gibsons Way until it gets up to the Ministry Road. So the idea is to figure out how the traffic should be flowing. And so a lot of vehicles use Glassford as a cut through. And part of putting traffic calming in is to channel vehicles in the direction or to the roads that you want, and to keep them off roads that you don't want them on.
Dave, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
There is a request. Is it possible for you to enlarge your map so that it can be seen more clearly?
I don't know. Give me just a second. Come on. I'm going to skew it for starters because it wants me to do that. So I'm just going to do that temporarily, and that's part of my presentation, but I'm just not going to save it. Okay, let's see whether I screwed up anything here. Whoops, and I've gone back one. Okay, so sorry, it's not a clear map to start with, and if my cursor, oh, it's interesting, my little arrow cursor is working better. So can you see my bouncing cursor there? It's over in, oops, over in Gibsons Harbor there. So this orange section is Gower Point Road. Here's Secret Beach here. Gower Point Road and the collector status of Gower Point Road goes up here where you get to Bayview Heights, then goes over here to the stop at South Fletcher. Then it goes down beside Dougal Park to Gower Point again. And Prowse Road and the marina is down in this area. Dougal Road is this road here. And then, as I say, this is continues to be Gower Point Road with the post office on this corner here. And then Gower Point Road then goes through or alongside Weingarten Park and through the village here. And then you get to what we call Five Corners because of School, Gower Point, Gibsons Way, Marine Drive coming in, and Mully's. So at that intersection, there are two collector roads. One goes up the hill to North Road on Gibsons Way, and the other one goes through and along past Armours Beach and out towards the ferry where it joins up with the Ministry section of Marine Drive. That's, as I say, that the suggestion for closing Glassford Road is based on our road classification and where vehicles are presently going and where they should be going. And we recognize that in many roads, the roads are not up to the standard that we would like to see. However, work in progress, we do work towards that as funding permits and as development progresses. The traffic counts indicate that the section in orange there, going back to the Gower Point traffic calming, not the Glassford, is that most of the traffic that uses that stretch of road are traveling between the ferry and Area E. And that's based on what we see with traffic counts correlated with the arrivals and departures of ferries. So the OCP, the official community plan, encourages active transportation and notes that Gower Point Road in this section here is a primary pedestrian and cyclist route. And generally, the roads are to prioritize non-vehicular modes of transit wherever possible. So Gower Point Road's a little bit of an odd duck in my mind, because it's not entirely collecting traffic at that point. It's collecting some, but it's also, Garrow Point Road as a whole isn't really an ideal collector road because, as I mentioned, we go through the village, we go past Dougal Park, and we go through this very narrow winding section of Garrow Point Road. And so there's a little bit of a balancing act to take there on putting traffic calming in and, as I say, the function that the road is intended to serve. So there's several different proposed traffic calming elements on this section of road. And these have been proposed by the developer's engineer or traffic consultant. And they took into account feedback from largely from TRAC, who put forward some ideas, and we'll be having a follow-up discussion with TRAC in regards to that. So one is centerline rumble strips, and they say that's a modest impact. So the rumble strips, you've probably driven across them when you perhaps drifted too close to the side, the white line, and there's this rumbling sound that makes you, get back in your lane. And the same treatment can be used at center lines. And so this is being proposed for the center lines in certain locations. Now, rumble strips, as well as providing a wake up to drivers, they are also quite audible outside. And believe it or not, they have something that is loosely shown on the right hand of the screen, and they produce less outside noise, and they are called mumble strips. And so those would be used in areas where they're adjacent to residential properties. The other one that is the only proposed treatment that will have a noticeable impact on slowing traffic down. And this is a short one-way section of road where, similar to probably many of you, when you're driving, especially in other areas of BC, you'll come to a bridge and it's a one-lane bridge, and you take turns based on who arrived first. And also very similar to the concept of a four-way stop, where you stop, you wait for the people who arrive first to progress through the intersection, and then it's your turn. The photograph on the right-hand side there is a photograph of Prospect Lake Road in Saanich, where they were having speeding issues, and eventually there was actually a death there. And this is showing the initial measures prior to the permanent barricades going in. So that's another treatment that is being proposed. And as I say, the only treatment that is seen to have a noticeable impact on the traffic speed. There's a safety fence that we are at this point just making allowance for, and that is on the water side. And the reason we're only making an allowance for it at this point in regards to traffic calming is that it will have potentially an effect on the northbound traffic, the traffic that is traveling closest to the water. However, the side that we're concerned about is the opposite side of the road, on the landward side. On the water side, there's that multi-use path, which would be used for cyclists traveling in the northbound direction, as well as pedestrians traveling in both directions. So that's of lesser importance and certainly less effectiveness as far as a measure. The other thing is to consider a textured road surface. And if you're interested in seeing this and how the asphalt on North Fletcher, this is a photograph of North Fletcher in construction on the left-hand side, where our typical 6 meter width of asphalt narrows down to 4 meters and it has an additional meter of concrete on both sides. So the overall width of the road is still 6 meters. Those concrete strips can be driven on, but visually it gives the appearance of narrowing the road. And supposed to, it's supposed to be a little bit more as part of a traffic control element. And so we use those as our local road standard. Yes, I know that Gallpoint is collector. However, we're only using or proposing to use these in certain locations, and you'll see that on our the diagrams coming up. But in the on the left-hand side of the screen here, you'll have your typical asphalt width of 6 meters. And then further up, you can see that there's concrete's being poured, and outside to outside is still 6 meters, but inside the curbing or the flat curb, which is at the same grade as the asphalt, is 4 meters. So working from the Franklin Road end going towards Secret Beach, the first thing that would be happening, or the first thing that you would encounter, is a crosswalk that will be linking up to a trail and the multi-use path that is on the that will be extending all the way through to Franklin Road. And so at the crosswalk location, that's where we'll see that narrowing of asphalt, narrowing of asphalt and the concrete strips that will be lining each side. And as I've done my limited abilities on my screen sketching, and this crosswalk markings actually would extend over to what's shown as the extent of the asphalt right now. And this red line represents more or less what you will be encountering as you came along the road, that this visual narrowing. However, if you have traffic oncoming, then you can easily drive on the concrete portion of the road. And that's at a view standing at Franklin, looking towards if you're heading to Secret Beach. So the next section is kind of the S-bend that is along there, or one of the S-bends. And those are proposed to have centerline rumble strips. Traffic was traveling, typically travels between 40 and 50 kilometers along this section of road. I drive it fairly often. I honestly don't feel that comfortable driving it faster than 40 kilometers an hour. Really, ideally, it will be slower than that. But many vehicles do cross over the center line when they are doing 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. And the one section here, looking at my little cursor, is next to residential properties. And so those will be the quieter treatment of mumble strips, whereas this would be the rumble strips. And yes, I'm serious. So this is a photograph taken from next to the last residential driveway, I think, heading towards Secret Beach. And so that curve there would have those mumble strips. And then this is traveling the opposite direction. You can see the water on the one side, and that is this S-bend here, or part of that bend here. And those will be rumble strips along through that corner. So moving on, actually I'm going to go back to along here. Here's your boardwalk, and it's a kind of a mixture of boardwalk or asphalt, depending on how much room you have. And regardless, there is going to be a curb all the way alongside that when it's completed. That's kind of separate from the traffic calming. So our last section we've got here. First off, here is the 1 meter, or sorry, the 1 lane section of road that is suggested to be 60 meters in length. There will be another set of rumble strips here as on that last corner and probably I think the crest of that that section of road, and then you come down into those concrete strips again with the crosswalk as you exit the town, which is right here on the left. So looking at it towards Gospel Rock itself, coming from Franklin, here is just a sketch showing, what you might see as a one-way section. At this point, we're just talking conceptual, but one of the ideas is that bikes would not have to abide by that one-way section. They could actually ride on the remaining portion of the road, and we would need something physical like curbing along here rather than paint lines. Otherwise, we'll have people just ignoring the one-way section and taking the two-way option. And then, similar to what I showed you at the other end of the improvements, another crosswalk here, which will link up to the boardwalk along the water's edge, and then to a trail that winds its way up to Gospel Rock itself. So that is the end of that section. Time-wise, I'm a little behind, but at this point, we've got 10 minutes for questions, but I'll probably extend that a little bit. So Rebecca, over to you.
Yes, we have Kathleen McKnight. Go ahead. Oh, Catherine McKnight. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, this section where there's just one way.
Yep.
I mean, to me, that's insane, because you're going to have great big traffic jams at the, or bottlenecks during the ferry traffic times. It's just going to, I just think it's nuts. It's going to be a real inconvenience particularly for the people who are, who live down in that area. Mm-hmm. Trying to get out. I mean, we'd have to time everything very, very, very carefully. I just think it would just cause problems. I just see it causing problems if you have a one-way strip there.
So one thing I didn't mention in this, Catherine, is that not only will this affect traffic speed, it is more than likely going to affect traffic volume, because that's one thing that traffic calming does, is it, and is intended to do, is it discourages traffic from traveling a certain route. So, and hopefully if everything's done right, we'll encourage them to follow the route that is consistent with the road classification. I mentioned arterial, collector, and local. And so, and I bet you anything I can hear the arguments already. However, based on the classification of our roads and the long-term vision of the OCP, as well as the long-term plans of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the traffic traveling from the ferry should be going up the bypass along either Reed or Gibsons Way, and then down Pratt to stay on their arterial road if they're going to go to Area E, and vice versa when you're heading to the ferry. I recognize that there are challenges in that, and some of those challenges are strictly traffic volume. And so a lot of the reason why people take this route is because it's faster because of the traffic volume, or the traffic volume on the arterial road. And there's also concerns along Pratt because of vehicle speed and vehicle volume. However, Pratt is also an arterial road. And so although many of our roads are not yet constructed to the ultimate standard, that's not going to happen in yours or my lifetime. I don't care how old you are, because it just takes time for traffic volume to hit a certain, like for the ministry, for example, they wait for traffic volume to hit a certain point, then they make these other improvements. So speaking strictly from an engineering perspective, vehicles are supposed to be taking the nearest collector route to the nearest arterial to head where they're supposed to be going. And as I say, I do recognize that there are challenges on some of those roads, regardless of how we look at it. And this is one of the challenges that we have on this road. Rebecca.
Yes, Steve. Next, you have Sue Armstrong.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, Sue Armstrong. I live on Franklin Road.
Sorry, Franklin?
Franklin, yes.
Yes, okay.
I'm concerned about, well, where you come out of Franklin and try to turn left on Gallpoint. You want to go to IGA or the medical clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to police that 30K speed limit? I mean, It sounds good, but if nobody's out there policing it, it's of no use.
And yeah, I'm agree with you.
So,
generally speaking, yeah.
And also, the point of Gallpoint, there's a big, deep ditch on the right-hand side. You're heading out to Secret Beach. There's a deep ditch, and we had a nice big truck in the ditch not long ago.
Yeah.
Yes, which caused a bit of an upset. Is anything going to be done about that ditch? I mean, it's been dug out to the lowest point. But
yeah, there is going to be, so part of the improvements that Block 7, the Gospel Rock developer needs to make is to that ditch. There is a slight realignment of the road near Franklin, which should improve that visibility as well, pulling out. And the problem in the past with how roads have been constructed, and maybe Gower Point's a little bit of an exception there just because it's a windy road anyway. But if you look at South Fletcher, very wide, and you can easily travel 50 kilometers an hour if it wasn't for the speed humps, because you got lots of visibility, dead straight road. Same with Glassford, big wide road, no problem hitting 50 plus on that. Now what we require is for the engineers to design a road so that it is extremely uncomfortable to drive faster than the posted limit. So that's why these traffic calming elements are in place here, is that it is going to be uncomfortable for drivers to exceed the speed limit. And why we wouldn't just post this with 30 kilometers an hour if we're trying to slow traffic, just because signage on its own, completely ineffective. And the other thing I want to mention is that although the town council is responsible for setting speed limits of local roads or municipal roads for any speed limit other than 50, it is the RCMP who is responsible for enforcing that speed limit. And so wherever we do have problems, we do let the RCMP know and leave it in their hands to do enforcement as resources permit. So thank you. I appreciate your question, Sue.
You have a similar question. You may feel that you've already answered this, Dave. So will the speed limit for Gower Point Road between Franklin and Fletcher also be 30 kilometers per hour? If so, how will that be enforced? Because right now the traffic zooms through that section at 50 plus. We are concerned the speeding traffic along this section is already very problematic, and it needs traffic calming measures similar to what is in place along Fletcher. The next question is from Nancy Hughes. Has consideration been made to banning dump trucks and other large vehicles from Gower Point from Franklin to Secret Beach?
For starters, I have a feeling that trucks aren't going to like this very much. Some of these traffic calming elements that we're proposing. However, that's a good point and something that we could easily sign there for as a no truck route, similar to what we have posted on School Road for other reasons. So I think that's worth including in the signage. And yes, obviously there's some policing involved, but residents will often do the policing themselves by reporting license plate numbers or company names, and the message can certainly get across to that commercial thing, the commercial users. So great idea. In regards to the other question about the 30 kilometers an hour Garrow Point Road, you have to be careful with the use of traffic calming because it's intended to push vehicles, slow traffic on the road itself. But then the other part is the quantity, and which I mentioned in this here. In regards to the arterial and collector roads, is that it not only will it reduce the speed, it will reduce the quantity. And so with Gallpoint Road between Franklin and South Fletcher, yes, speed may be an issue. However, we want traffic to be going that way because that is our collector road. Having said that, I am suspecting strongly that these measures will then trickle down and impact the other section of Garrow Point Road that you mentioned between Franklin and South Fletcher. The other thing that council is appealing with UBCM, Rebecca, what does UBCM stand for?
Union of British Columbia Municipalities.
Thank you. They're asking for, as well as other municipalities, the ability to do blanket speed limits so that, for instance, if you were coming in from the ferry by Marine Drive there, you would come across a sign that said, this area is a 30-kilometer-hour blanket speed zone. And that would mean that every street until you exited that blanket area going up School Road or what have you would be 30 kilometers. What the Motor Vehicle Act requires right now is that everywhere where you have a road intersecting, you have to put 2 signs. So if the road, if a vehicle comes out of that intersecting road, they know they're on a 30-kilometer-hour, even if they've lived there for 30 years. You have to have all these signs posted. So the number of signs just ends up being ridiculous in order to post sections of road as 30 kilometers. So you end up with just a litter of signs. And the police won't enforce it if they pull somebody over and they can't ticket them legally because the speed limit isn't posted properly. So it's a challenge that council and other municipalities are dealing with to try and make create blanket speed limits. And one of those areas would be Lower Gibsons.
Next, you have a question from Jody Schick. Go ahead, Jody. Jody, you're muted. If you could please unmute. Sorry,
You're still muted, Jody.
still muted, Jody.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Dave, I'm actually speaking on behalf of TRAC tonight.
Okay.
We're thrilled that the consultation has kind of finally come forth and that the town is looking to its residents and nearby residents to solve these longstanding problems with this section of road. TRAC's primary concern is really to find a design that makes the route between Gibsons and Elphinstone accessible to both cyclists and pedestrians while maintaining some level of vehicle access. You know that we submitted proposals for a variety of options about a year ago. And with these, we had some pros and cons along with each. And you also know that we've given you some comments back on this current proposal as well. And we're looking forward to ideally a side-by-side comparison of all of these options. That's a bit more in depth than what we've seen so far, because we think there's some strong candidates in there as well. Just one specific question I have right now is one of the proposals we put forth was a light signalized option for one way that would have a longer single lane section than is currently proposed, and essentially a section that would span the area that's really difficult to have a dedicated bike lane for westbound traffic. And we'd like to see a real thorough comparison of that with these other ones. We're surprised it isn't included as an option, at least at this point. You know, it's included as an option on, or it's used on some very long bridges or comparably long sections of road, notably a one-way bridge in Revelstoke that's about 350 meters long. So it just seems like a strong candidate for something that would maintain two-way traffic in here. Sure, there's going to be a delay, but there is an alternative option to using the highway, and it would definitely be the most affordable way to provide a dedicated bike lane for westbound traffic that would provide something comparable in terms of the level of accommodation for cyclists as you would get from the multi-use path for people traveling east.
So
Thanks.
that was your memo was given to the traffic consultant to look at those options, and they felt, and I would tend to agree, that that's going to cause even more isolation or more cutoff, more impact to people who are just basically wanting to come into Gibsons. The other thing, from an asset management point of view, traffic signals are hugely expensive. And I'd have a hard time recommending that because we could not afford to maintain them. The costs are quite high on traffic signals to construct as well as to maintain. So that was part of the reason, but you know, we can go into that in more depth when we have our next chat. Rebecca.
Yes, Matt Lovegrove, go ahead.
Okay.
Matt, can you unmute, please?
Oh, yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Hey, Matt Lovegrove, Gower Point Road. Thanks, Dave, for all your work on this. I know it's an extremely challenging stretch of road to be delving into. This is more of a procedural question, I guess, about the community consultation going on. So the report that you put out on June 15th, just about a week ago, or June 16th, there's a lot to consider there. I've been kind of making my way through it and taking notes and heading back and make a coffee and take some more notes. You know, of course, with whatever changes take place that are proposed, they're going to affect a fair bit of community, a fair number of community members, whether they're you know, drivers or cyclists, pedestrians, tourists who walk out to Gospel Rock. And I'm just curious at this point in the process, will there be more opportunity for public feedback on the proposed traffic calming that's set out in the report and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting position that staff are in right now, because council, through the development agreement, has authorized staff to basically work with the developer to come up with some satisfactory traffic calming options. However, on this item, we recognize that staff recognize that there's kind of a bigger impact, even to my job, if I went ahead without, you know, at least letting council know. And I think really the any steps that may happen after this point would be based on the feedback that we're receiving now and in writing. And so, to be honest with you, I cannot tell you what that process is until we've gather all that information together. However, my intent is to report back to council during a meeting in July, and that should have some recommendations from staff at that point, which council may or may not follow. They may come up with their own other recommendations or resolutions out of that meeting. So stay tuned. Rebecca, I don't want to run out of time on the next item. So what I'm going to suggest is that we move on to the dog park, and I do our presentation on that. And then when we hit 9 o'clock, I'm willing, if you are, to stay around for another, say 15 minutes, 20 minutes to take any remaining questions on any of the subjects that we have discussed. And I can see that we've got 18 Q&As on Zoom right now. Rest assured that any of those questions will be put together in a report along with the answers or solution or what have you. or proposed solution. So if you have not had an opportunity to speak tonight, please either email infrastructure@gibsons.ca or just use the chat function now, and we will hear what your concerns are. But I certainly appreciate the amount of interest that we've had, and these are just capital projects or development projects, and Zoom certainly seems to be a great way to get interest from the public who would understandably rather be in their home sitting on the couch with a beer than in council chambers, or at least I would anyway. So I will go on to the dog park, and then please stick around, and we'll take a few more questions at the end. So the dog park, this is for input, comment, and questions. And I'm going to go through several locations that staff are putting forward as consideration. If there are any other locations, we're also interested in hearing other ideas. So this is very preliminary. Council has indicated definitely a desire to hear from the community as to this matter. What's occurring right now is, at least in Upper Gibsons, is that Brothers Park is being used as an off-leash area. And the primary use for that is sports. And you can appreciate probably that an off-leash bike area or off-leash dog area doesn't always work with sliding into third base. So council has a desire to provide an off-leash area, an official area, and then discourage the use of Brothers Park for that purpose. So far, either as a complete budget or as money to set aside, there's $25,000 included in the 2021 5-year financial plan for a dog park. As we've looked at this in staff's opinion, which we will be reporting to the council, but we have not, so we have not discussed this with council, is that we almost need two areas, one for upper and one for lower, because I can imagine a lot of people who are dog walkers want to walk to an off-leash dog area and wouldn't want to hike between upper and lower to do it, or necessarily drive. So that's just strictly a staff idea, and we'll be putting that before council. Possible locations, again, from a staff perspective in Lower Gibsons is Dougal Park, and anyone with children, hold the phone. I'm going to explain how that could work with the current uses of the park. Pebbles Beach, the upper area, and that Pebbles Beach is at the corner of Franklin and Headlands. Harmony Hall, again, hold the phone and I'll explain. And Aurora Way, there's two locations of town land there. As mentioned, there's no council direction at this point regarding possible locations, except that staff have mentioned the Aurora Way idea, and somebody, I believe, during a meeting mentioned Pebbles Beach as being or the upper park area as an option for Pebbles Beach, using that as a dog park. With every one of these sites, once we've potentially, hopefully, narrowed down some choices, would require additional discussion, assessment, input from other parties. And so none of these are a done deal. This is for conversation purposes and to allow us to take initial feedback to council to let them know what the dog walkers of our town feel about this. So the one place is Dougal Park, as I mentioned, and there is an area along the one side of Dougal Park that is free of playground equipment or what have you, and that's right along the edge, and it would provide a reasonable width, especially if you're throwing a ball and you have relatively good aim. You've got 30 feet by 330 foot available area. Now, any of these, it doesn't mean that the whole area has to be the dog park. I'm showing you potentially the area that could be used. Council may decide, let's do yeah, Dougal Park's great. No, I want it only half the length, or what have you. The benefits is that it is centralized and relatively centralized in Lower Gibsons, and very close, obviously, to many residential areas. There are some land use restrictions for future park use. I believe the land, or a portion of the land, was donated by a local church, and there are provisions in that covenant. So if a dog park or a fenced area is not within that, we would have to approach them and say, hey, what do you think? Is this within the the intent or the nature of the covenant and the desire of the people who donated that land? So the other one I mentioned was Pebbles Beach, and this is not the beach itself. This is just the upper flat area, quite treed in there, and that's 15 meters, so wider than the Dougal Park area, and 165 feet long. It would eliminate the non-beach park use. It is close to residential areas, a little bit more on the outskirt, but I see no shortage of dogs in that area when I take ours out. It may be partially impacted by planned bank stabilization in that location. And it would require a corridor, fence corridor for other park users or people who are accessing the beach. We wouldn't expect them to go through the dog park itself. Another one is Harmony Hall, and some of the ideas that we were bouncing around on a staff level is we've got this grassed area on the one side. It's very wet, so it would require some drainage improvements. And we've also got this parking area, which is used at certain times of the year, but not all year round. And we could do something funky there with some gates where we could open up those gates and either close the dog park temporarily while that parking area is being used for an event or a function. And or we may be able to do the fencing in such a way that the dog park is shortened for that period of time, or you just keep it in the grassed area. That was supposed to mute my phone, but instead it gave my PowerPoint presentation a hissy fit. Sorry about that. So the full area is 65 feet by 200 feet. Excluding the parking area, it's approximately 20 meters by 35 meters, or 65 feet by, I don't know, something slightly above 100 feet. Again, close to residential areas, and it does require drainage improvements. There would be more cost associated with this one, just to, if you wanted to be able to keep the option of the parking area open. And the other thing that we were contemplating in here is actually potentially removing the asphalt and making that a gravel parking area. So these are just ideas on a staff level, and we are just floating these out to stimulate discussion, for want of a better word. And of course, we have the hall users who can't recall which group actually rents the or has the lease on that building. So obviously, council would want consultation with them, and before we got any distance down any road, would need to discuss it with them to determine whether it's actually a viable use of that space or not. So now we're into the only area that we've got, or we've identified from a staff level, in Upper Gibsons, and that's Aurora Way. Anyone who lives up there, you probably noticed we got power lines running through there, and that is town-owned land, but BC Hydro has a right-of-way over the land to allow them to have their big transmission towers and and electrical lines above. So there's relatively little that the town can use that for. And we would still need to consult with Hydro to find out if a dog park would be. I couldn't see why it wouldn't, because all we're talking about is fencing. And of course, all the backyards have fencing. So why wouldn't dog park fencing be allowed? And it's not blocked to public use anyway. However, regardless, we would have to check with BC Hydro. On the north side, there's a little bit more of a mowed area, green space. On the south side, it's a little bit more let it be. And the north sides, give or take, apart from the weird shape, is roughly 75 meters by 35 meters. And I didn't bother doing a conversion on that one. I'll leave you to do that on your own. South side is 35 meters by 120 meters. So any one of those or either of those areas are actually larger than the ones in Lower Gibsons. And again, we do not have to use the whole area. We do not have to use both areas. It's just putting out this area of land as a possibility. So that slide there shows the proposed locations, just so that you have kind of a bit of a visual as to where they are in relation to each other. And the bottom of Lower Gibsons is kind of through this area here. And so that would be the area that the densest residential area. There is Heritage Hills area up here. However, I don't think there's any viable locations for a dog park in that area. But 3 possibilities in Lower Gibsons there so far. And then the 2 possibilities either side of Aurora at this point that staff have identified. And what I would like to do at this point is I'm going to use my last slide just to say what the next steps are on each of these items. And then I'm going to go back to the dog park, just so that anyone who's attended and may not be as interested in the dog park or interested in asking more questions, at least they know what the next steps are, and they can leave us if they desire. So next steps on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. You see why we use acronyms. It's UNDRIP. You might hear that one. This is for ongoing learning, individual awareness, and relationship building. And obviously, council can only mandate certain things. They can't require that of you, but they are committing to provide that to staff. And staff are also committed to, many staff are also committed to doing this on a personal level, with or without council's direction. However, I would really encourage you to have a look at the links that are provided on our website. It's just an easy place to go to, and do a little learning yourself if you are not familiar with what has gone on before, or even if you have a vague idea, because as you dig into that, it's quite shocking and horrifying as to what has gone on in Canada, that First Nations in many ways are still dealing with, or at least are dealing with the aftermath of a hugely traumatic event. And just before I leave that subject, I don't know if anybody, when they heard the number of children that they found in Kamloops, but that's within, that's almost a population of Gibsons Elementary. And you can imagine if we had lost every child that attended, Gibsons Elementary, Roberts Creek, whatever it is, how us as a community would be affected. And because we all know children, we all have neighbors, we all have children. And so this is what First Nations are dealing with, and the children that they just discovered are just a fragment of what is to come as far as evidence. And on top of that, the concerns have been largely ignored and only very, very recently acknowledged as far as the residential school system. So I really encourage you to look at that and see what the history is around here on the Sunshine Coast. Active Transportation Network grant. We are going to have ongoing meetings with TRAC. We're kind of splitting it up into different projects. Some would have a little bit more back and forth than the others. Mostly, I don't see there being a huge council input on that. It's largely kind of design elements that, you know, are details that we'd be dealing with. I don't see any council decisions. However, I definitely, we will be keeping council apprised of this. And if there is anything of significant impact that we need council direction on, no two ways about it, we will be bringing council into that. But at this point, the ongoing meetings with TRAC are on a staff level, as council has requested, and then as work in individual areas progress, we will be letting everybody know what is going on. Gallpoint traffic calming, we are considering the feedback from the residents from this meeting largely. Staff will be reporting back to council regarding comments and questions, and eventually we will be notifying the developer's engineer to proceed with the final design. However, I don't know what's going to be coming out of this because I'm not using this information just to pass to council. I'm using, in this case, 48 people's different ideas to come up with appropriate recommendations or a way to address the issue that we've got there. And lastly, the dog park, again, based on what comes out of this meeting, there may be a survey, I don't know, but we are going to be reporting back to council with feedback and requesting direction from council on this one. So early stages yet on that one. So if I lose anybody here because you've got your concerns have been already spoken to, thank you very, very much for showing up. As I say, these seem to be very effective so far, and I really appreciate the input that you provide and the willingness to sit and listen to me for too long. So going to go back now to questions on the dog park. Thank you. Over to you, Rebecca.
Okay, Dave. First up is Catherine McKnight. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm just curious. Most of those places, they seem fairly small, but you know, I realize there's limited space. What about the space behind Bliss up there? There seem to be all these trails up there. I don't know if that's private land or if any of that is town land possibly be used.
That's so the area you call behind Bliss, it's also behind the pool and the curling ring. And so that is White Tower Park, and those trails through there, I wouldn't be recommending that to council because we have a lot of users in there who are elderly. And while elderly people do, you know, many of them, you know, are dog lovers themselves, not having a dog in full control around elderly people who may be a little bit unsteady on their feet or what have you, I don't think it's a good mix. And just as an FYI, we are going to be building a very neat stormwater pond naturalized area, expanding the White Tower Park into that flat area behind the pool. Rebecca.
Yes, next you have a question from Leanne Johnson, who writes, it would be wonderful to have some dog size sorting, at least one with small dogs separated from big dogs. Also, please provide benches inside the fenced area. Maybe some will want to do memorial benches.
Okay, thank you. And we will take that down and include that in our comments to council.
And then you have Gabby Blaszak, who writes, please consider for the dog park location, noise, parking, park maintenance, traffic flow. Harmony Lane may have existing parking, but multi-use, including Harmony Hall and Jack and Jill. Can additional parking support this? Traffic on Harmony Lane is two-way despite being a lane that only supports one-way traffic in existing format. How will this be managed? Traffic is already crossing the grassy areas when particularly heavy. Traffic off Cochrane coming in both directions is uncontrolled, with parents and seniors blindly taking the grassy corners and practically knocking over walkers. There are no sidewalks here. Maintenance haven't been in, I don't know, SM dog park in a while, but unsightly water buckets. Yeah. Oh, thank you. But unsightly water buckets and garbage was not being managed. What about ground maintenance? The area is marshy. Isn't this a riparian area? Environmental emitting to clear as would be required by the residents when making amendments to their properties, and noise. How about the residents? Is the noise bylaw in effect here? That's a lot in one message.
No, but that's fine. It's still all good comments for us to be able to address in our report. So thank you.
Okay, and then you have Rita Kutsodimos. She says on Burns Road, I don't have strong opinions about these options except to say that the upper part of Pebbles has been an informal dog park for several years, and it has good fencing between residents, and it has very low traffic during the fall and winter months. As a dog owner, I do appreciate a fully fenced off-leash dog park.
Sorry, I missed the location she was talking about.
She was talking about Pebbles, the Pebbles Beach location.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. And I don't need names on these ones unless there's, yeah, I don't need names on these ones, Rebecca. We've got.
And then next up is someone with their hand up is Pat Thomas.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Pat.
Hi there. I live on North Road, very close to Aurora Way. And in my area there, you were speaking of seniors. There are a lot of complexes like Twin Oaks and North Oaks, which are 55 and older. So we'll just start with that because you had brought that up. So when I walk my dog on leash, I go up Aurora quite often, almost daily. What I see is a lot of traffic going from north towards Reed, and the ferry traffic is coming the other way, and people are cutting up Aurora to boot it up to get onto Reed to try and cut out some of the traffic. I'm just saying I see this every day. When I do walk my dog up there, that is not an off-leash park, but everybody is off-leash in those parks. Many of the dogs come running towards us and they cross the road, and the other owners are, trying to get their dog to come back, and they don't. Cars stop, dogs panic, all the owners stress out. I would think before you would consider either part of that hydro as an off-leash park, it should be fenced first. And Absolutely. You have to provide parking because it's just on-street parking, and people get out of the cars and their dogs are off-leash. And, Fido goes running one direction while you're trying to get him in a gate in the other direction. Shirley Macy is an off-leash park. It is not that far away. I understand a lot of people cannot walk there, but it is off-leash. I don't go there because my dog has to be on leash. So I would say, my concerns are the traffic because it's getting busier and busier. And already there are dogs and owners. It's not the dogs, it's the owners that do not control their dogs. They don't come back on command. And I would like to see, it's not off leash now. I would like to actually see it being more controlled before it becomes off the leash. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Pat. It's assumed in all of this that this dog park, off leash dog park, would be fully fenced for that very reason, that if we're encouraging people to come, we want to, or that staff's recommendation, and I believe my understanding from council is the same, is that they want it to be a fenced area for that very reason, and be a matter of educating users to keep their dog on a leash until they are safely in the fenced area. Rebecca.
You don't have any more hands raised. The rest are written questions from in the Q&A.
Okay.
So I can keep going through those.
However, Kathleen Vance just raised her hand apparently.
There you go. Kathleen Vance just raised your hand. Okay, go ahead, Kathleen.
Oh, I don't have a dog, so I'm not quite sure. I probably don't really experience this. I mean, I like to see my neighbors walking their dogs, but I mean, my thing is that it's not like Gibsons has a lot of park. Like that little park at Pebbles Beach, it's tiny.
Mhm.
And around Harmony Hall, I mean, during COVID last summer, that was used a lot. I mean, people were singing because they could keep distance. And I kind of worry about Dougal Park because you already explained that we're going to lose 3 meters. We're going to lose a certain amount because in order to have a wider sidewalk.
So, oh yeah, it'll be very, very minimal.
Oh, so that's minimal. That's not, we're not losing much of the park for that.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay. So
I bet you wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah, that's my anxiety, is just not because I don't like dogs, but I sure love parks.
Yep. Interestingly enough, I think Gibsons has a very high ratio of parkland to resident. That's my understanding from planning anyway. But, you know, we do as residents and council as well value our green space, and that's extremely important to all of us for our well-being, as well as providing options for recreation. Rebecca, anybody else?
Yes, you have Cal Clausen. Go ahead, Cal. Cal, you're still muted. Please unmute yourself.
Am I okay now?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead, Cal.
Having raised dogs all my life, and German Shepherds and big ones, now my size of pet is a little Cairn Terrier, and I can guarantee you that I respect and you know, really appreciate people with big dogs, but you cannot put little dogs and big dogs together in the same setting. Some people have good commands over their dogs, others have not. At 3 o'clock at Brothers Park, we have a little gathering of small dogs. Even though that is very, you know, informal, about a month ago, a dog was killed in that open park setting, and it was heart-wrenching. If you're going to have an open park for dogs, I'm hoping the council or the city will at least appreciate what Powell River does, is has a dedicated park for smaller dogs and one for larger dogs. That's basically one things I think that should be considered in this whole design process.
Good. Thank you, Cal. Appreciate that. And that will be noted to council as well. Rebecca, any other hands up at this point?
No further hands are raised.
Okay, so we are at 8:58, and what I'm suggesting, just to test the waters here, is to take anybody with hands up on any of the 4 subjects that we talked about, and probably around 10 past 9, we'll make a call as to whether to do some of the written Q&As, draw a close to the questions, or extend the meeting for verbal questions. So if that sounds agreeable to other staff, I see Donna McMahon has already raised her hand. So let's take some questions on any of those 4 subjects.
Go ahead, Donna.
Hi there. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Donna, how you doing?
Good. So the boundary between Area E and Gibsons on Gower Point Road there is arbitrary, to put it mildly.
Sure.
And so the need for traffic calming doesn't actually end at the boundary. So
right.
Is the town going to work with Modi for a transition section of road between the boundary and Secret Beach?
I mean, we have kind of limited authority, so to speak. I know that the regional district is interested in you know, working with staff, our town staff, to promote cycling routes on Modi roads. And to be honest with you, before or possibly in conjunction with traffic calming, I see the biggest need along there is accommodation for pedestrians and cyclists, because the town boundary actually stops at one of the more difficult sections to navigate. And there's challenges with funding, where you spend money on, including obviously the regional district, where they spend money on. And I believe they've worked with the ministry in the past. But I think we can pass that message on to council to see what we can do to do things on the political level. But on the staff level, we are talking more with the regional district about these joint ventures, and that includes Reed Road. The answer is, I suppose, one, staff will continue to work with the RD and let them kind of talk to Modi, and then definitely pass that message on to council for further improvements, and see if they can put any political pressure to bear. Rebecca, anybody else with their hands up?
I don't see any other hands up.
Oh, okay. That's not what I expected, but that's fine. Are there any, just scanning through the written Q&As, are there any burning ones that you see would be important to speak to, or are they all okay just to record? And
well, there's quite a few in here. There's about 30 questions in here. So there was one that I thought might be quite, how far off the ground is the southeast side of the suspended walkway? This is with regard to Gower Point.
So that will vary quite a bit. And there are going to be appropriate guardrails along that boardwalk. And it's really going to be dependent on where the location of the road is, because we have to maintain the 3-meter width for each road lane. And as I mentioned, there's some areas where it will be asphalt path. Other areas where we do not have room for that will be the boardwalk, and appropriate safety rails will be put in.
We have another question about the creation of a bike lane on Gower Point by Dougal Park. Has there been any consideration to residents leaving Alder Springs trying to turn onto Gower Point?
Not entirely clear on that. However, right now the intersection if you're exiting Alder Springs on the left-hand side is out further than the right-hand side. And as part of the crosswalk work, we will be bringing the intersection out in such a manner that the Alder Springs residents will have better visibility past the parked vehicles. So if anything, we'll see an improvement in that area for visibility.
Another says they're concerned about that the idea of making Glassford one-way going north and Gower Point Road going one-way south is being too readily dismissed. Other traffic calming measures such as speed cushions can be implemented in order to calm traffic on both roads.
Yeah, and the answer to that one is one that you'll often see the increased speed. I do hear what you're saying about the traffic calming. However, we're also talking about the road hierarchy and the long-term plans for our roads, whether they're arterial, collector, or local. And right now, the traffic is supposed to be on Garrow Point Road, or the majority of the traffic is supposed to be on Garrow Point Road, not on Glassford Road. And I don't believe that what we would be doing a one-way section in both directions, or those two sections of road being one way, I don't think that is appropriate, considering the road network planning for the town.
All right, and you have another question about Gower Point Road. Why would traffic calming measures not be extended all the way down Gower Point Road up to South Fletcher and not stop at the Franklin intersection? It seems that one section which is residential is being totally ignored.
So again, that goes back to the classification of the road, is that the vehicles are supposed to be traveling on Gower Point Road, which is classified as a collector road as opposed to the local. And one of my recommendations to council will be to look at widening the shoulder to provide, at least in the interim, a safe area for pedestrians to walk. I do anticipate that the traffic calming that is put in on that winding section of Garrow Point Road, we will see a reduction in vehicle traffic, period. Because whenever you do traffic calming, invariably you reduce the number of vehicles as well, which is the intent of the traffic calming in that area. And putting traffic calming on Gower Point Road, which is where we want vehicles to be on this side of the boundary. If we put it there, then we are almost certainly going to see traffic increase in other areas because traffic calming does those two things. One, it slows traffic, and two, it forces traffic onto other roads. And so we don't want to do that on that road because that is the designated corridor through town.
Next question. Will the pedestrian protected trail, which reaches and crosses Franklin, as it shows in your first diagram, and then continues northward toward town, be eliminated north of Franklin if it becomes a lot for sale or affordable housing?
No, the trail or the pedestrians and cyclists will be directed down Glassford Road, and there would continue to be a section of road dedication there that regardless of whether the road closes or not, that will allow for pedestrians to go down Glassford Road. And as the preferred route, recognizing that some people will continue to go along Garrow Point Road. And as I mentioned, my recommendation to council would be that we widen the shoulder along there until enough money comes from somewhere for us to be able to do further improvements on that section of road.
Next, the rumble strips do work well. Why not make it continuous throughout this section of dangerous road? The entire road, not just curves, should be calmed.
Yes, and there's largely the rumble strips are on the center line of the road, and they are to stop traffic crossing over the center line. Generally speaking, in the other locations, there isn't that problem. It's only on the curves where they are crossing the center line. So that rumble strip alerts them to that fact, makes it unpleasant to drive on. If you carried on the rumble strips on the center line for the rest of the road, it's going to have little to no impact because those aren't areas where traffic is crossing the road or crossing the center line.
Here's the one. He says, as a Glassford resident, why are there no other options on the Glassford survey? I am concerned about both the impacts on nearby streets with the closure, which are not constructed as collector roads. The closure will also do little to lower vehicle speeds on northbound traffic that remains on Glassford.
Yeah, understood. And that is where I believe the second question was, are you in favor of other traffic calming elements? This is heavily paraphrased from me, if the road closure doesn't proceed. So there was an option on the survey for suggestions or thoughts. Are residents in favor of traffic calming period on Glassford? And if so, what would they like to see? So those were other questions on that survey besides just the closure.
Would council consider banning truck travel on Gower Point Road with the exception of essential town services and deliveries? As we saw recently, a large truck damaged the road near Franklin. It would be so much better to ban large vehicles from that section of Garrowpoint Road. We
Yep.
live on Garrowpoint Road.
So that is certainly something that council can consider. I do definitely see merit in that, and could support that in a recommendation to council, or initially I could support it. I'd have to look into it a little bit further as far as impact. But if we're trying to encourage other vehicles to take the most direct route to an arterial, it certainly makes sense for larger trucks as well. And as mentioned, I suspect that once the short section of one way went in, if that ultimately what happens, that you'd see truck traffic starting to drift away into other areas. But certainly we'll put that forward to council as a possibility.
I see we have a hand up, Kathleen Vance. I'm going to bring her in. Go ahead, Kathleen.
I was just thinking, I thought that earlier question had to do with the new pedestrian footpath that goes by the houses on Franklin, the new ones, and goes behind Maple Road, and whether or not that would still exist.
Yes.
I mean, it's a very nice.
Yes, that would still exist. And so, yeah, if I misunderstood that question, yes, the intent is that path would still exist. Definitely. Or more to the point, that's what staff's recommendation to council would be, is that the lot be formed in such a manner that path stay in existence.
Then a question is asked, has consideration been given to extending the sewer along Gower Point Road as part of the upcoming change?
Yes.
And I see I must have cut Kathleen off too soon. My apologies if I did. Go ahead, Kathleen.
No, I was getting mixed up. I was trying to say thank you, and I wanted to lower my hand.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Yes, we have money set aside for the sewer because the developer of Block 7 is creating 6 lots right opposite Franklin and Glassford, and they need to service that with a low pressure sewer that will be hooking into our system. And we've set money aside, or council set money aside, to extend that sewer to as far as the last residential property within the town there, just a short distance up. I think there's 6 or 7 properties that could connect to that sewer. So yes, based on the timing of the developer.
Thanks, Dave. Here's someone asking, what about the traffic lines as they wait for their turn? I see more traffic fumes invading the homes on Gower Point Road both ways, with the traffic jams and further jams with the crosswalks.
So the crosswalk is, yes, people will have to legally stop for pedestrians. And so certainly there will be more stopping at those 2 locations than currently exists. And again, the proposed one-way section, I am anticipating that the traffic calming will do the 2 things that it is meant to, is that 1, it will reduce vehicle speed, and 2, it will redirect traffic to the more direct routes to arterials. And so you'll see a reduction in traffic volume as well. And so you're not going to have big, long lineups. You know, I can't promise that, but that's what we are anticipating from this traffic calming.
Dave, can you let people know how long they can enter submissions or questions?
I would say probably to the end of the week, unless anybody else from staff has thoughts otherwise. No, not seeing anything. So I would say to the end of the week. And then, as I mentioned, we don't know if council is going to provide direction for any of the subjects to do further consultation or work or what have you.
And we have a question saying, I am a new resident to Gibsons and a dog owner. I much prefer off-leash trails to dog parks, so I don't have an opinion about dog parks, but I do hope that more off-leash trails in Gibsons will be considered in the future.
Again, we'll pass that on to council, and welcome to Gibsons. And if you are not aware, there's some great trail systems up in the woods, like just phenomenal network. So while they might not be within walking distance of a normal dog walk, there are some awesome trails up there that that you can access as well. So, but regardless, the comment has been heard and will be passed on to council as well.
There's someone who says, I have a question about the boardwalk. What consideration has been given to the issue that Elphinstone-bound cyclists will inevitably cross over the road to use the boardwalk on the south side? With the current proposed design, the 3-meter path is a far more appealing space for cycling than the on-road options, even though it was not designed for two-way cycling.
The boardwalk I can see being more popular perhaps for cyclists that are not comfortable with riding on the road, but the idea of this traffic calming is one of the main things, one of the main objectives here is to make it safer and more comfortable for cyclists. So if you are heading towards Secret Beach from the town of Gibsons, the idea is that it is safer and more comfortable for cycle users. Yeah, that's the, as I say, that's the objective.
Someone writes, many thanks for your hard work on this topic. We are interested in reading the report at length, but have found it difficult to enlarge the maps. In particular, we'd like to see exactly where the boardwalk and bike paths will be built. Is there an enlargeable map, perhaps a PDF version, that could be shared with the community?
I'm just trying to think what, there was the staff report that went to council on this, or sorry, went to committee of the whole. That would have been the 14th, I think. So that version might be easier to enlarge. And if not, what I will do is I will talk to our communication person, Elizabeth Quayle, and see if there's a possibility to put something more user-friendly on the website for this. So your concern's been heard, and it's been heard by Elizabeth as well, because she's been listening in. So thanks for that comment.
Someone writes, widening the road, while likely costly, would benefit all road users and allow for bi-directional car, cycling, and pedestrian usage. Was an analysis undertaken to determine the feasibility and cost?
That is an area that would be impacted fairly greatly if the widening of the road, which would have to occur by blasting, was to occur. And so that's right adjacent to protected lands. And we already have, like that whole area up there is dryland forest, and which more than likely doesn't pay any attention to property lines and extends into the road dedication. Plus the blasting for enough in order to get bike lanes in would be quite a significant scar on an area that is meant to stay as natural as possible.
Going back to the dog park, someone asked if there is sufficient parking at Pebbles Beach for a dog park.
Though that's a good question. We would, one of the things that I would be interested to know at some point is how many people drive to dog parks, how many people walk. We're coming up to 9:20. In fact, my clock just switched over to 9:20. I'll take one more, Rebecca, and then we'll call her quits for the night. We're down to 20 participants. Thanks for sticking around. And Rebecca, go ahead and provide one more.
Just looking for, so many of these are actually comments more than questions. The various options for traffic calming on the portion of Gower Point Road from Franklin to Secret Beach is confusing. And the one-way portion would be very confusing, and people who don't regularly drive the road may not understand the need to use the four-way stop procedure. Plus, the bottleneck of traffic would be horrendous during specific times of high volume. Again, it's more of a comment, but you might have something to say about that.
Yeah, there will be signage in place that would clearly indicate to drivers what they are supposed to do. And of course, whenever you're in an unfamiliar community, you may come across traffic elements that you are not used to, such as bike lanes in Vancouver, traffic circles in other communities, and it just requires appropriate signage, appropriate traffic markings, and so we're not coming up with anything fancy without having proper engineering in that as well. So thank you. And once again, I appreciate everyone coming out. We're down to 15 people now. I'm going to go have a dinner, and we had lots of good feedback tonight. So thanks again for showing up. Rebecca, I'll let you take care of ending the meeting and so on.
Okay, thank you.